All right, this is Ryan McMahon again. I'm going to do a video on the power of number. This is sort of in line with my last video on the complete number 9. Although I'm getting this from a different source, I'm going to be quoting R.A. Schwaller de lubicz, who is an amazing philosopher, scientist, Egyptologist, and mathematician. And I'm going to be quoting his chapter, The Cycle of Polarization, in the book called A Study of Numbers. And these concepts are definitely abstract and pretty heavy, but he's basically taking mathematics and showing how number as a still point creates space and time, and then through space and time creates geometry. And of course, this geometry would be sacred geometry. So hopefully you can just pause the video and listen to it more than once and meditate upon his words, because the language and syntax is kind of dense. But here we go. The Cycle of Polarization, R.A. Schwaller de lubicz. Once the nature of the irreducible one is known, it is relatively easy to follow the disengagement of numbers according to their general scheme described. The irreducible one possesses a double nature, and this double nature, which is passive and active respectively, must manifest itself. Herein lies the mystery of numbers. The cycle of polarization is characterized by generic selection. The irreducible one. The irreducible one is both masculine and feminine, passive and active, but its nature is not androgynous. This is to say, these two natures exist only potentially and not yet manifested. Generic selection is hence impossible in this state. Okay, what he's saying right now is that the irreducible one, meaning the number one, or oneness, is irreducible in its infinite stage, and in its infinite stage it is pure potentiality. So it's infinite consciousness, or God consciousness, with no boundaries. It has no body, it has no container, it is infinite. And so that makes it irreducible. As soon as you put a container within it, or scoop some out of it, or put boundaries on it, or put a body in it, then it becomes oneness, but reducible oneness. And that's what man in his body is. Okay, going on. As we observe above, the action of polarization is the fact of scission. And scission means splitting, like Pisces means the splitting of pie. So in scission, in the absolute state, this scission has not yet occurred. Hence the state is purely causal and has its being outside of the cycles of manifestation. Okay, so this is what I was just reiterating. He's basically saying it's purely causal in this state. So it's not reducible. It's irreducible. In its absolute nature, the absolute nature state is not understandable. From the moment, however, that we observe its double nature, we have already provoked the scission. For the one, the unique irreducible cause, is recognized by its double nature to be 2. So here he's talking about the initial split in sacred geometry, the birthing of the vesica Pisces, which is oneness, or we could say a cell dividing itself in the process of creation, or you could say generation. And when the cell divides itself into 2, it's only in duality can it be known or detected or recognized. So the way in which oneness knows itself is by dividing itself. And thus, man is that initial split. And also you could say within man, man dividing himself creates the ego. So man's initial split within himself is the birthing of the ego. Okay, going on. Thus we may add to the new unity to the causal unity. And this new unity is 2, the number 2. So 1 is irreducible unity, absolute nature. 2, reducible unity, the manifested nature of the irreducible one. Successively, then, we obtain 3 distinct natures. Okay, so now he's talking about how duality produces the number 3. 1, the irreducible one, active and passive, in itself, oneness. 2, passive nature, feminine. 3, active nature, masculine. In actuality, the manifestation of the active nature, which is masculine, necessarily precedes that of the passive nature, which is feminine, since the irreducible one, having to manifest itself, becomes 2 and is above all 3, and hence is the values 1 and 2, without which there would be no creation as we realize it in its state. So here he's saying that creation itself is due to this manifesting process. Manifesting is due to this splitting or division from causal oneness to duality. This fact is explained in the Bible in the words, God created man and made him a companion from the one of his ribs, so that he would not be alone. So here he's saying that this is a metaphor. This whole Adam and Eve story of woman being born out of man's rib is just a metaphor for sacred cosmic principles of numbers. So Adam's rib is just Adam's duality, splitting himself. So it's not that woman was made from man, it's that man itself is made manifest in duality. Continuing on. Indeed, from the moment that there is activity, there is already opposition to it. The infinite circle is now broken. Scission has provoked the first polarization. The first active nature, which emerged from the irreducible one, or rather was created by it, potentially contains in itself the passive nature. The latter is part of the activity which, manifested either as active or passive nature, is from this moment on androgynous. The first absolute number is father-mother. The second number, polarized number, is androgynous. The third number is bisexual. As it does among numbers, this function exists everywhere, creating the races, or minerals, vegetables, animals, and man. For the moment, however, the process of manifestation is far from being terminated. In the first polarized number, we are still dealing with a created being and not yet with a procreated one. We observe 2 complementary natures, but they are still interdependent upon each other. They must devolve to the point of being independent, that is, to the moment when the feminine and masculine natures become individualized and organized. The created must procreate, and the procreated must likewise procreate in its turn. How are the 2 natures distinguished? The active nature is what we called, in polarization, the moment of the arrival of the current. In the circle, it is the part which possesses, and therefore the part which can give, its quality, force, and energy. So that's the masculine current. The passive current, which is feminine, or the passive nature, which is feminine, is the moment of departure of the current, the part which is left. It is emptied and hence can receive. In its opposition to activity, for it determines a quality for quality. Before it determines a quantity for quality. It is the fecundated nature which creates by the quantitative determination of vital activity. Quality is the number, and quantity is the value, which measures and fixes the quality. When the first 3 unities are defined and have formed the first 2 numbers, a new polarization occurs, a scission necessary for the manifestation of the 2 natures. Considering this, we call it the first triangle. We find 1, which is the father-mother, and 2, which is androgynous. These 2 numbers form three unities, the number 3, following in the sequence. The new triangle now will therefore be, which is the first two numbers, are creators. As such, they are creative unity in manifestation and are different, therefore, from the absolute creative unity. The first triangle is composed of two successive numbers and gives us three simultaneous unities. If we consider the first triangle, we can see that it is composed of 5 natures. First, 1, which is the two natures in 1. Second, 2, which is twice the 1, such that each one, the two natures, are potentially differentiated. Hence, this triangle has 2 passive or feminine natures, 2 active or masculine natures, plus a nature which cannot be defined other than by a very imperfect term, father-mother. Thus, like the number 3, the number 5 is creator, but the number 5 still only constitutes the different non-manifest natures of 3. Creation will not be concluded until all these natures existing in a potential state are manifested one-to-one, that is, until they have taken on form, hence quality, or hence quantity. In the beginning, it is very difficult to disengage or isolate these different functions. As long as we are in a certain state, it is real for us. But as soon as we pass to the state created by and hence following it, it is apparently no longer so. We descend with its creation, which is to say, our consciousness is modified. By this token, the abstract is a real world, so long as there is nothing concrete about it. As soon as there exists, however, a concrete world, our consciousness appropriated to it can no longer conceive the abstract by a concrete representation of accommodation to it. Thus, one can see 2 is the concrete form of 1. These 3 ones, in turn, produce a unity which is abstract in relation to their own creation, which is 3. In other words, one cannot remove the idea of triplicity from that unity, since it immediately gives us 3. Although in reality, there are 5 natures in this triangle, and 3 times 2, hence 6, the number 3. Nevertheless, in the number 3, each unity is triplicity, giving us potentially 9 principles. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to go with this particular study on Schwaller de lubicz. And he's talking about the complete number 9 at the very end there, but he's breaking it down into a trinity and how the trinity is actually manifested and represented by numbers. And those numbers actually build length, height, width, and depth. And they manifest what we sense as the world around us and the universe. So just expanding upon this numerical idea, I'm going to describe it in more metaphysical and mystical terms of what Schwaller de lubicz is getting at in scientific terms. So much of this knowledge will fly by your thoughts, but when meditated upon, it will reveal a natural mystic truth to all who have eyes to see. Look at the symbols of the Western world, primarily Egypt. The tetrahedron triangle is the heart center in the body and associated as fire, the transformative element. 2 tetrahedrons encircled are the hermetic, Hern, or mercurial symbol when inverted, so as to one facing up in masculinity and the other down in femininity. This symbol used by many cultures stems from the land of Kemet to unfold the union of male-female light into one original light of causal, potential stillness. It spins into genders, creating new life through union or procreation. When conceived, the newborn is represented as a circle, complete and whole, no corruption. The still point or nucleus within it is termed Isis. The radius extending out from Isis is termed Ra, or Ra Dios, meaning light God. And the circle's edge is the God term Elohim, or El, Circle. These make up three gods or aspects of God, Holy Trinity, or light, in the geometric and mathematical language of light and shape. The entire universe, when drawn, is only done so as a circle. The equations and vectors within the shape are a play of light and shadow known as sacred geometry. Look into the great minds of Plato and Pythagoras and meditate on the geometry to raise your mind out of the left and through the right and into the union of higher consciousness. As in ancient Egypt, they say, all the gods are three, and then back to one in Atum.